I can't wait to see Bradley Cooper in it. So, Dark Phoenix, which is the latest X-Men film, which I don't know why they didn't just call it X-Men Dark Phoenix, but it's Dark Phoenix. It opened up in theaters, and it bombed. It did not do well. It made, like, I think it had, like, a 20-something on Rotten Tomatoes. And then it made only, like, $33 million opening weekend, which, for a movie that's over a $200 million budget, first of all, it never should have been over $200 million to make this movie. I mean, I understand there were reshoots and all that stuff, but, am I not live? Hold on one second. I want to double check and make sure I'm still live. Oh good, I am live. Sorry, one second. I'm having some technical difficulties. I apologize about this. As I said before, this is my first stream that I've done in a while, so I knew that there were going to be some technical difficulties, but I'm currently trying to set it up. See, here's the thing. I'm trying to get the chat. There we go. Okay, chat's all set now. Alright, I apologize about that. As soon as I start doing these more and get back to the habit of it, it's going to be fine. But, so Dark Phoenix, it didn't do great at the box office. It didn't do great critically. It's the last of these Fox Studios X-Men films. It's the last one. I saw the movie. I didn't think it was all that bad. I thought it was pretty middle-of-the-road X-Men movies. There are definitely X-Men movies, and I'll get into more of this in my next topic. There are definitely X-Men movies that I think are better, and there are definitely X-Men movies that I think are worse. Dark Phoenix is pretty middle-of-the-road. But it's not been doing well. It's not been connecting. Simon Kinberg has been talking a bit about Dark Phoenix underperforming, and he's taking a lot of the responsibility and blame for that, as he should. As a director, he should be taking the blame for that when a movie fails like that. And not every factor necessarily ties into him, but as a director, he is the creative driving force behind this film. He is the one in charge of it, and he is the one who ultimately should get the blame if it goes up in flames. A lot of people have been talking about the biggest problem with the movie being Simon Kinberg being a first-time director. Now, a little bit of history on this, and if you want more thoughts on this, I have my spoiler-free review for Dark Phoenix, which is up on the channel, which I go a little bit more into this part specifically, my thoughts on it, as well as my overall thoughts on the film. Simon Kinberg had never directed anything before he did Dark Phoenix. It was his first time directing anything, and he steps in to do this $200 million film, Dark Phoenix, which is just, it's never a good idea to give a first-time director, someone who has never directed anything in their lives, it is never a good idea to give them a movie of this size, of this importance, of this stature. It's never a good idea. I mean, yes, Simon Kinberg has been involved in filmmaking as a producer and as a writer. He's been involved for decades. He's been involved in the X-Men for years. But just because you may be an outstanding producer and you may be an outstanding writer, that does not necessarily qualify you as an outstanding director right off the bat. He should have done something else and then went and done Dark Phoenix, because it's just, that was a mistake. Now, upon seeing the film, and that was all stuff I was saying before the movie, I thought that was the biggest reason that I've been saying for months and months and months and months leading up to this film. I thought that it was going to be a disaster. I thought it was going to be an utter train wreck. Now, seeing the movie, one, I do not think it's an utter train wreck. I do not think it's an utter disaster. But I also don't think Simon Kinberg's direction is the weakest part of the movie. I just think it was kind of a piss-poor script. Which Simon Kinberg did write the script, but it was not the direction, at least in my opinion, from my point of view, it was not the direction that sank the movie. But this kind of transitions us into our next topic, because now that we have Dark Phoenix in theaters right now, it's not doing too great at the box office, people aren't liking it, it's the last film in Fox's 19-year X-Men series. You know, so, sorry. Fox has been doing these X-Men movies for 19 years. We all praise Marvel and the MCU for their films. You know, they have a 22, 23 film repertoire. They've been doing it for the past 11 years now, which is impressive. But I think in our efforts to praise Marvel for what they have done with their films, we forget how damn impressive it is what Fox has done with their films. Has Fox made worse movies than Marvel has made in the MCU? Yes, by far. I think that the weakest films in Fox's X universe are far weaker than anything in the MCU. But I also think that Fox has put out movies that are even stronger than some of the best ones in the MCU. If you're talking about Logan, I think Logan is better than anything they've made in the MCU. Days of Future Past, maybe not necessarily better than like Civil War or Iron Man or Guardians of the Galaxy, but it's right up there. Fox has made some very impressive films. Let's take a look for a second at what Fox has done and made with their films. So they have put out 12 movies over the past 19 years. We have X-Men, which came out in 2000. Now people forget that the original X-Men movie came out in a time where we were not nearly at the point in terms of comic book filmmaking that we are right now. Comic book movies were not mainstream. Comic book movies weren't opening with an almost guaranteed 150 million plus opening weekend for, anything that comes out. We were not at that point. Just 2 years ago, before X-Men came out, we had Batman and Robin, which single-handedly killed the Batman franchise. It's hard to imagine Batman being killed as a franchise sunk by one movie. But it's true. Batman and Robin came out, sunk. The perception behind comic book movies at the time were that, one, these were for kids. Batman and Robin was famously originally made from the point of view, they're like, okay, we want to sell toys. So how do we make a movie that allows us to sell these toys? That was the approach to the film. Nobody took these movies seriously. No, yes, you did have Blade. Blade came out, but that was a smaller comic book property. A lot of people didn't even know it was a comic book property. And while it featured vampires and all that kind of stuff, it didn't really deal with superheroes as people understood superheroes to be. It wasn't Spider-Man, it wasn't the Avengers, it wasn't X-Men, Fantastic Four, anything like that. X-Men comes out, and it shows people we can take these comic book characters in a comic book that everyone thinks are for kids. We can take those characters, and we can make a live-action, seriously taken film that doesn't treat it as kids material, that isn't made just to sell toys, but actually tells an interesting story, has dynamic and engaging characters, and has a great cast and great actors. Now, a lot of the actors, of course, have gone on to be fantastic. Like Hugh Jackman was a nobody when they cast him in X-Men, and now he's revered all these years later. But I mean, to have someone like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen in these movies, I mean, that was a huge step. That was a huge step. And so for X-Men to come out, it helped make comic book movies normal. It helped significantly in the normalization and making comic book movies mainstream. And it made a lot of, and more than just the average perception, the public perception of comic book movies. It helped producers realize, oh, we can do this. We can take these comic book characters. The producers of Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, they've said that one of the biggest things that made them realize that they could do those movies was seeing the success of X-Men. Then we had Spider-Man. Then we had Fantastic Four, which wasn't the greatest. And we had a whole bunch of stuff. But it was because of X-Men that paved the way for something like the MCU to eventually come. Because if we did not have the normalization of comic book movies through something like X-Men, we never would have had Iron Man. We never would have. So let's go back to this again. So we had X-Men from 2000. We have X2, which X2 is fantastic. X-Men, I think, looking back on it now with the comic book movies we have now, X-Men 1 isn't as impressive. It's not a bad movie by any means. It's just we've gone so far now that X-Men 1 isn't as impressive, but it certainly holds its place in history, contextualized, and for what it did for the comic book movie genre and for films as a whole. X-Men 2, fantastic. Last Stand, that I think that is my least favorite. That or X-Men Origins are my least favorite. But so then we have The Last Stand, which was terrible. X-Men Origins, Wolverine, terrible. And then we have First Class, which revitalizes everything in 2011, brings in fresh new actors. And then we have The Wolverine, which is the second attempt at a standalone Wolverine movie, which is sort of a forgettable movie. But it led us to Logan, which is why it's as good as it is, I guess. Then we have Days of Future Past. And Days of Future Past is fantastic. Of the shared group X-Men movies, I'd say Days of Future Past is probably the best. I think of those, of the group here, I'd say Logan is by far the best. And then I'd say probably Deadpool is right up there with it. Oh, not on the same level as Logan, but in terms of the best of these movies, I'd put Deadpool right near the top. But of the shared group X-Men movies, Days of Future Past is probably the best. And it was fantastic. And so then we go to Deadpool, which was excellent. Now think of it in these terms. So we're going to be getting X-Men going into the MCU. A lot of these, I mean, something like Deadpool never would have happened at Disney. And a lot of these movies that we're seeing right now, a lot of these, while they were like, especially the first X-Men was sort of like a trailblazer comic book film to really set the path. I mean, other than it just being we're making a comic book movie with characters and taking it seriously, there aren't too many risks in any of these movies. But you get to something like Deadpool. And to make an R-rated comic book movie, I mean, yes, we'd had Blade. We'd had something like that before, yes, obviously, but that was, at that point, that was years ago. In this modern era of 2016, making an R-rated comic book movie like that, on a character that not everybody knew, and to have it be as edgy as it was, and be, like, that took major props on Fox's part to make something like that. And I tell you, Disney never would have made it. If Disney was in that situation, forget about whether it was connected to the MCU at all. If they were in a position where they could make an R-rated Deadpool movie like that and be, you know, the first one to jump in the lake or whatever to test the waters, Disney never would have done it. Disney never would have done it. And it was Fox that said, you know what? Yeah, we're going to dip our foot in the pool. We're going to be the ones to do it. And it's because of that we got something as great as Deadpool. And it was because of Deadpool that we got Logan. But first, alright, so we have X-Men Apocalypse, which I think a lot of people shit on. I don't think it's the worst thing ever. I don't think it's one of the worst X-Men movies. It's one of the weaker X-Men movies, but I don't think it's one of the worst. But yeah, it's Apocalypse is whatever. But then we get Logan, which I think is the crown jewel of all the X-Men films. We never would have gotten Logan if it wasn't for Deadpool. Deadpool showed, hey, you can do an R-rated comic book movie and have it be successful. In fact, I didn't even realize this until I was doing some research. Deadpool 1 and Deadpool 2 are by far the highest grossing X-Men films. They had by far the biggest opening weekends, and I believe they're also the highest grossing worldwide. I know they're definitely the biggest opening weekends, but they might also be the highest grossing worldwide. I'm not positive on that second part. But Deadpool showed, hey, we can make an R-rated comic book movie, and as long as we keep the budget relatively low, as long as we don't go too crazy with it, we can be incredibly successful and make like over 700 million worldwide. So what happens? They put out Logan. Logan, which goes on to be nominated for Best Original Screen or Best Adapted Screenplay. Logan, which was one of the best movies of that year, at least in my opinion, and I think is one of the finest comic book movies to ever be made, and it was a film that transcended the comic book movie genre to be just a great character study drama. It showed that you can do such new and dynamic things with the comic book movie genre. Logan did that. And if it wasn't for Deadpool, we wouldn't have had Logan. And so it took Fox to really just go, you know what? Let's think outside the box. Let's do something different. Let's do something unique. Because if it wasn't for Fox doing this, Disney wouldn't have done it. Disney wouldn't have made the R-rated character study Wolverine movie. Warner Brothers wouldn't have put out an R-rated comic book movie. The only reason we're potentially getting R-rated comic book movies from Warner Brothers is because it showed to have success over at Fox. It took Fox to do that. So we have Logan. We have Deadpool 2. And now we have Dark Phoenix. So, and New Mutants is excluded from this. So, I mean, I'm saying this is the 19-year legacy of X-Men films. But, I mean, New Mutants, one, we don't even know if it's going to get a theatrical release. Who knows what's happening with that? It's been stuck in production hell for so long. Who knows exactly what's going to happen with that. But, so I'm kind of excluding it from this overall list. But, I kind of see this collection of films, these 12, to me, this is the X-Men legacy. The X-Men proper legacy, and you kind of have a footnote for New Mutants. But, we can reassess that when New Mutants comes out, if it ever does come out. But so now that we've looked at all the films Fox has put out, let's just take this time to really appreciate what Fox did. Fox put X-Men out, the first X-Men, in a time where comic book movies were not mainstream, they were not normalized, they were seen as kid properties, and if you wanted to make a comic book movie, it was to sell toys. And then Fox put out X-Men 1 and showed that doesn't have to be the case. And that jump-started the whole comic book movie genre to the point where the MCU was able to put out Iron Man in 2008, and they were able to make the MCU. Now, Fox has had some low points. X-Men Origins Wolverine, The Last Stand, definitely have had some low points. But their highs have also been high. Logan, Deadpool, Days of Future Past. They were the ones who decided to take the gamble, take the risk, be the first ones to put their foot in the pool and make an R-rated comic book movie with Deadpool, which then led to Logan. Here's the thing. We're all getting excited about seeing what Disney does with the X-Men. And again, I said this all through the merger. If it was up to me, I would rather have the X-Men as separate from the MCU. Just because I think, one, think of it in terms of we have Fantastic Four and X-Men coming over from Fox that will be brought into the MCU. Fantastic Four is incredibly easy to just slip into the MCU. It doesn't require a lot of mythology building. It doesn't require a lot of rewriting. They're just 4 characters with their villains that you can just kind of make a movie about. It's very easy to, and plus the tone of the Fantastic Four works so well with the MCU. But with something like the X-Men, you're talking about the entire history of that world being rewritten and changed to accommodate the X-Men. Not only that, but you also have like hundreds and hundreds of characters associated. You, as evident by Fox with their movies, you have an entire cinematic universe in of itself with the X-Men. And so I always felt like there's enough there for its own thing. And if it would be so much work to kind of rewrite the mythology of the MCU in order to accommodate them, to let them in, what's the point? Why not make it its own thing? But that's beside the point because they're going to be their own thing. So we're all excited to see what Disney does with X-Men. We're all excited to see what Feige does with X-Men. But let's not lose sight of what Fox did with X-Men. Because if it was all under Kevin Feige, or if it was all under Disney from the beginning, we would not be in the place that we are now. We would not have had the original X-Men to even set the stage for something like Iron Man to come 8 years later. We would not have an R-rated Deadpool. We wouldn't have had Logan be what it is. Fox's X-Men, and I think their ultimate legacy, and while they kind of ended on a bit of a sour note, I think the ultimate legacy of Fox's X-Men is that they helped normalize comic book movies from the beginning. And they helped show that comic book movies don't have to be this very rigidly defined thing. Comic book movies can be more than that. You can make a raunchy R-rated comedy, meta-comedy with Deadpool. You can make a serious drama, Oscar contender film like Logan. You can do different things. You don't just have to be the same thing. And so, as we move into this new era of X-Men, under new leadership, under new management, under Feige's direction, under Disney's ownership, while we all are excited about the prospects of that and what is to come, let's not lose sight of everything that Fox did with the X-Men. So that's all my thoughts on that. Let's go over and take a look at the live chat and see who's in there. All right, we got Rich Reviews joining us. Hey, Rich, it's good to have you. Rich was a frequent person who joined us for our live streams before, so it's good to have Rich back. Let's see what Rich is saying here. So, Rich, let me confess that I enjoy The Last Stand, which I prefer over the self-serious X-Men and X-Men United. You are not wrong on that. And, well, one, no one is wrong because all film is subjective, it's all opinion. But you're not wrong because I've talked to plenty of other people who actually do really enjoy The Last Stand. Let me put it this way. This is the reason why I don't like... So, when I was younger, I would watch The Last Stand. And, you know, there's big bombastic action stuff, and there's some cool character moments. But, you know, it's not nearly, at least in terms of my idea, it's not nearly the same quality as X-Men 1 and 2, and I recognize that. I think what really made me change my tune about Last Stand from being, it's fun, it's whatever, to being, I hate this movie, was I was in science class in high school. High school. And my science teacher, it was biology class, he put on X-Men The Last Stand because it was talking about mutation or whatever. It was just because he didn't want to teach. But seeing that movie, kind of looking at it from the perspective of, okay, here's all these other students. They don't know anything about X-Men. They don't know about X-Men 1 or 2. They're just walking into this completely blind. You know, no other attachments from previous stories. They're just watching this. And watching it from that perspective and just seeing the story in of itself, seeing the characters in of itself, and seeing the action, which action can be fun, but it's just the action, you know. Seeing it from that perspective made me really go, this is just not a good movie. And so I know there are other people. Rob Jacinta, who is a frequent co-host on this channel, he really likes The Last Stand. So I mean, you're not alone in thinking that, Rich. How is it that in Dark Phoenix no one has aged? No idea. It's really funny. Someone put out like a graphic that has I think it's all the different time periods from all the movies. So you just have Michael Fassbender, 1962, 1970, whatever, 80, 90, and then all of a sudden Ian McKellen in 2000. And supposedly in Dark Phoenix, he's Michael Fassbender, and then in 8 years from 92 to 2000, that's how much he aged. You know, it's, it's, yeah, I don't know, but it's just, Fox has never cared about their continuity. Fox has never cared about their continuity. I mean, I don't want to go into spoilers, but things happen in Dark Phoenix that clearly do not happen in previous movies. And some people say, well, Days of Future Past overrode all that. It didn't necessarily overwrite all that. They just do not care about continuity. They don't. They'll just do whatever it is they want to do for that movie, and they really don't care if it sets up what comes next. I mean, like, look at Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler joins the X-Men in Apocalypse, but it wasn't until X2 that he joins the X-Men. So, I mean, they do that all the time. So, I mean, yeah, it's kind of funny to look at it as a meme and laugh about it, but ultimately the answer is that Fox just does not care. Um, Rich writes, I prefer Femke Jensen and James Marsden over Ty Sheridan and Sophie Turner. Yeah, I could agree with that. I think I just prefer, I don't think it's so much the actors as much as I just prefer the older versions of those characters. I mean, in both cases, I felt like they didn't really do much with Cyclops either time. I mean, he barely did much in the when he was James Marsden. He didn't do that much when he's Ty Sheridan. Femke Jensen at least had more to do with Jean Grey, and while Dark Phoenix is all about Sophie Turner as Jean Grey, she still doesn't even do that much. So, you know, I wouldn't disagree with that assessment. I felt no great love between Sheridan and Turner. Well, I think, yeah, I'd agree. Like, there wasn't that much of a connection. I mean, there were a couple moments where they tried to make you feel that, and that was my larger point about Dark Phoenix, was that I felt that a lot of the emotional beats of the film just didn't have much weight to them. It was clear they wanted you to feel the emotion, but it didn't have that. It didn't have any real impact or weight to it. But I'll say that, yeah, I didn't really feel this strong connection between them. But there are also, I mean, other than a couple of scenes near the beginning of the movie, there wasn't too much time dedicated solely to their relationship. It was more they were together, and then Jean Grey has her own story. So, so yeah, I'd agree with you that there wasn't really that there, but they also didn't spend too much time trying to develop it other than a couple quick scenes. Rich writes, I disagree with any criticism towards Spider-Man 3. I wouldn't go that far. Any criticism towards... Okay, I like Spider-Man 3 more than most. I like Spider-Man 3 more than any of the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies. But there's definitely some shit in there. There's some stuff in there that is very questionable. And it's all open to opinion, you know. If you feel that it's a perfect movie and that there's no one criticism to be brought against Spider-Man 3, that's entirely your opinion. And you're valid to hold that opinion, definitely. But personally, I think while I will disagree with a lot of people who say it's utter trash, and I personally like it more than the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies, yeah, there's definitely some criticism to be had with Spider-Man 3, in my opinion. How many X-Men comics have you read? I've read a decent amount. I read a lot of the original run of, so not the 60s with Stan Lee, but when they brought in, like, New Generation, you brought in Colossus and Nightcrawler and Wolverine, and you had all those characters coming in. I read a good amount of that run. And I've read from time to time. I've also read the Ultimate run on X-Men. I used to read a lot more comics than I do now. And so I have more of an understanding of the comics as opposed to actually having read all the comics. And now we're even like, at least for a good amount of time when we're in the early stages of like the MCU, like a lot of the stuff that was happening in those movies, I already like knew the comics story. Now we're so far advanced at this point, it's like, okay, I don't even know. Like I remember my go-to when I would talk to people about comics, my go-to character to show like how deep into the comics I was Ego the Living Planet. And then he was in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So I think we're at a point now, especially with the MCU, and I really know Marvel comics more than DC. I know some DC, but I don't know that much about DC. We're definitely at a point now with the MCU where, okay, it's beyond my understanding. I don't know anything about the Eternals. I didn't know anything about Guardians of the Galaxy. We're past my point of understanding at this point. Rich writes, have you seen Once Upon a Deadpool? No, I have not. Nor do I care to really ever see it, because all it was just a lesser version of Deadpool 2 with like 20 or so minutes of extra stuff. Because what else can it be when you take a movie that is rated R, you cut it down to a PG-13 for a movie and a franchise that is known for its raunchiness, for its R rating. That's the envelope that it pushes. That's part of the DNA of the franchise. It's like taking a Wolverine movie and then cutting out all his claws. It's just like you're kind of, all it can be is a lesser version of that original. And then you string together some stuff of him with Fred Savage. I don't know. It's just, there was nothing there to make it appealing. It was just always going to be a lesser version of Deadpool 2. And then it seemed like as soon as the reviews came out, that's pretty much what everyone thought it was going to be. Or said it was. So, if Dark Phoenix was a rousing success, we would have gotten Phoenix Force. I'm telling you, if Dark Phoenix was a success, we still wouldn't have gotten any movies. Because ultimately, Disney owns them now. And they had even talked about doing more than one movie. Even before the merger, they talked about making more than one movie out of this Dark Phoenix saga. Because in the comics, it's a lot more involved of a series run than it is in this movie. They talked about doing more than one. But I tell you, if Dark Phoenix coming out now, today, or when it came out a week ago, if it had been a big success and made like 150, 170 million opening weekend, and it had like a 90% something like that on Rotten Tomatoes, wouldn't have made any difference. Because Fox wouldn't have been able to produce another movie, because it's owned by Disney. Disney wouldn't make another movie as part of this continuation of the X-Men, because they're going to reboot it. So it wouldn't have made any difference. It might have informed what Disney does with their X-Men later on down the line. Like, they might decide, oh, well, if this iteration of Dark Phoenix was very successful, we might want to try the Dark Phoenix storyline somewhere down the road. But I guarantee you now, they're not even going to try Dark Phoenix again, because they've tried it twice with Fox. Both times have failed. Marvel's not going to try it. What X-Men film would you like to be in? Deadpool, because I feel like it'd be the most fun. What X-Men character would you like to be? Wolverine would be fun just because it'd be, Wolverine because it'd be violent and fun. But, I mean, I guess I have too much of a moral conscience to actually be... Alright, I'll go with Deadpool, because that would be fun as well. Is Disney the evil empire now? No. Disney is just a business. And this goes on to a larger issue. I kind of want to make its own video about that, because especially when Disney bought Fox... Well, okay, let me back up even further. When Fox was up for grabs, and it was between Disney and Comcast, I wanted Comcast to get it. And it was mainly because it came down to just the X-Men and Fantastic Four properties for me that I wanted. Fantastic Four I didn't care as much, but definitely X-Men I wanted separate from the MCU. And I thought it was for the best of the film industry that Disney not absorb another big studio like that. But it happened. And so now people are going around throwing the M word, monopoly, saying Disney has a monopoly over the film industry. They really don't. Are they huge? Yes. Do they put out a lot of movies? Yes. Do they make a lot of money? Yes. But for it to be a monopoly, I mean, Disney making their movies and having their success in their business, that doesn't stop A24 from putting out a movie. That doesn't stop Warner Brothers from making their movies, or Sony from making their movies, or Paramount, or Universal, or any of the other studios. Blumhouse. It doesn't stop anyone from becoming a studio. It doesn't stop any studio from putting out their movies. And just because Marvel makes 2.7 billion with Endgame doesn't mean that another movie coming out can't make money. And if your only argument for why Disney is a monopoly is, well, Endgame made 2.7 billion and a small independent film barely made any money when this was clearly better, even though it's all subjective, when this one is clearly better and should have made more money. Well, that has nothing to do with Disney. That has to do with the marketing team for that film and the general interest in that film. And smaller movies, independent films, are not going to be on the same level as something like a giant tentpole Disney movie. That's just the reality of it. So I feel like most cases and most arguments for Disney being a monopoly is just driven by people who are frankly salty that Disney is as successful as it is. Because Disney making movies and making a lot of money off their movies does not preclude anyone else from making anything else. It doesn't. Now, if Disney were to go out and buy Warner Brothers tomorrow, and then Disney was to go and buy Paramount, and then Universal, and then Sony, and we're to the point where it was only Disney making movies, that's definitely monopoly. But no, I do not think Disney is a monopoly. I do not think they're an evil empire. I think they're in the business to make money, which is their right and what they should be doing as a studio and as a film studio. And they're just putting out movies that are making people happy and they're making a lot of money. And good on them. Rich says, would love to meet you. Well, I'd love to meet you too, Rich. Rich says, so who would you recast at Wolverine? I have no idea. I'm not even going to play that game. Because, here's the thing. I've played the whole, who would I cast in this role game before. And it's just like, it's the same thing as speculation. Let me make this analogy. When Infinity War was coming out, I had all these theories and speculations and ideas of what was going to happen. And probably from the first frame of Infinity War, it was all completely different things. Because I didn't know anything that was going to happen in that movie. I didn't know what they were going for, what the tone was. I had no idea what that movie was. And so when I was making my speculations, my guess of what was going to happen throughout the film, it was all in thin air. Like, if I had said at the start of Infinity War, Captain America's going to die, you don't know. I don't know how that movie plays out. And so by the time we get to the end of the movie, it doesn't make sense for Captain America to die. And so then come Endgame, I just stayed out of the speculation game. I mean, I had a couple of things that I thought, and some of them were right and some of them were wrong. But I stayed out of the speculation game because I was like, the movie's going to be what the movie's going to be. Whether I guess it or not, So I'm out of the speculation game. And the same thing goes for casting. I used to play the who should be in this movie. Now, we could talk about hypothetical scenarios, like if I were making an X-Men movie, who would I cast for this? Well, it would all depend upon what my story is, what the tone is, what the budget is, all these different factors that would inform my decision in terms of who I cast. But if we're talking about what a studio is going to do, I have no idea what movie they're making. I have no idea what story they're telling, what kinds of characters they're having, what characters they will have. And so I have no idea who would be cast as Wolverine. And frankly, I mean, there have been so many times where someone has been cast that people have gone, like even Hugh Jackman. When Hugh Jackman was cast, everyone hated it because they just saw him as some Broadway singer-dancer. And then he turns out to be one of the greatest comic book movie castings of all time. And so even if I were to say, I would love to see Tom Hardy as Wolverine. I think at this point he's a little too old to start being Wolverine now. I would love to see Tom Hardy as Wolverine. But I think anyone who I could say is most likely not going to be cast. And then whoever they cast is most likely going to be someone who I never was even thinking of. So, because, if I was choosing Batman, Carl Urban was a big pick of mine. And then they went for someone younger, and they went for Robert Pattinson. I never would have guessed Robert Pattinson. So, it's really hard to say. It's really hard to say who should be Wolverine, because I have no idea what movie they're making. But if we were living in a perfect world, in a completely hypothetical situation, I would have loved to have seen Tom Hardy as Wolverine. Certainly would have loved to have seen him over Venom. Rich Reviews says, contemplating joining Twitter. I would highly recommend joining Twitter. There's definitely some negative things about Twitter, some bad things about Twitter. But I'd say if you're just careful about who you follow and what's in your news feed, I think Twitter can be incredibly productive. It's a great way to talk to people, to spread ideas, and to find out information and read news. As long as you're careful about following the right sources, following the right people to make sure you don't have negative or fake things in your feed. As long as you're careful about that, I think Twitter can be a very productive thing. Rich Reviews writes, Nathanael Molnár, 2020. Hey, you never know, right? Who knows? I could put my hat in the ring. There's plenty of other people, too. I could just add to that. So, anyways, I think that's going to bring us to a close for today's live stream. Thank you so much for joining us for the first time back for the Movie Paradise Show. A little bit rough. I had a couple technical difficulties. I apologize for that. The next stream will be on Tuesday, and I'll keep you updated as to what we will be talking about then. So, until next time, thanks for watching.